जय हिंद दोस्तों। क्या हाल है आपके। मुश्किल को समझने का तरीका निकल आता, तुम बात तो करते कोई रास्ता निकल आता। आपको पता ही है, ये मेरा फेवरेट शेर है, अंबर साहब का है। वेलकम बैक टू तुम बात तो करते। आजकल इलेक्शन सीजन है और इलेक्शंस में समझ में आता है कि हमारे जो लीडरान हैं, what they are really made of. And I'm not just talking about Modi Saab or the current government. I'm just genuinely surprised, as I believe many of you would be, at the overall quality of our political leadership. It was Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's birthday last week, and I'd like to start this episode by reading a poem all of us have learnt in school. It also sets some context to what I have to say today. And imagine that this poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, was written more than 110 years ago. So first in English and in Gurudev's words: where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Where knowledge is free. Where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Where words come out from the depth of truth. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. This is how Gurudev dreamt of and about India. Now, a Hindi translation I've tried. जहां दिल में कोई डर ना हो, जहां दिल में कोई डर ना हो, जहां झुका कोई भी सर ना हो, जहां इल्म आजाद हो जिंदा हो, जहां सोच आजाद हो जिंदा हो, छोटी छोटी दीवारों से जहां बटा न हर बाशिंदा हो, जहां सच से सोच निकलती हो, लफ्जों में जान मचलती हो, जहां बाजुएं कोशिश करने का हर दिन कमाल दिखलाती हो, जहां अच्छी सोच की धाराएं सहरा में नहीं खो जाती हो, रेगिस्तान में नहीं खो जाती हो जहनो दिल में सोच खुली, हो जहनो दिल में सोच खुली, मुश्किल ना कोई भी काम लगे, ऐसी आजाद सी जन्नत में है मेरे खुदा मेरे भगवान मेरा वतन जगे, ऐसी आजाद सी जन्नत में मेरा वतन जगे. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Idealism, ladies and gentlemen, is not practical. We all understand that. However, when we have high benchmarks, high ideals, we know the distance to be covered. They work as lighthouses for human ships like us, right? So they are directional. To more practical things now, dosto, many of us have worked for large and efficient values-driven organizations. I've had the privilege to work for a few myself. And sometimes as an ex-human resources and training manager myself, I can see the situation in India today where our political leadership is not made of the best human resources amongst us. And it may be the result of multiple process failures over many decades. Right from bad recruitment practices by political classes to bad induction, bad training, bad performance management, bad organizational development, bad culture building, bad leadership development, so on and so forth. And of course, lack of consistent human values, जो हर अच्छी company में होती हैं. If India was a really large corporate organization with departments and profit centers, our political unit would be a failed service delivery unit. Pakka. I'm not sure if I would hand over even a small high on ethics business to be run by most of our political class. And yet, the best minds in the country, the biggest leaders, the most high integrity men and women end up folding their hands in front of the most crass and undignified people in our country. Ye situation hai hamari. And whilst we can easily blame this on the current political leadership and system alone, we must share the blame equally. That very few of us ever wanted to touch social work or politics or even understanding public policy when we were growing up. So naturally, there has been a clear scarcity of trained and available high quality human resources to enter the political sector. The best of us became what? bureaucrats and professionals, or left India. And some of the worst of us chose to get into politics, not usually for reasons to serve, naturally, but to clearly be more powerful. If I remember from my class in school, I remember, especially from the science section, some served the armed forces, abhi mere bade achhe dost hain. And I think more than half of my batchmates are outside of India, mostly engineers and doctors, naturally. They all left as young men and women, similarly from my college. And for generations, that has been the trend. The best that we produce as a country, and I don't want to generalize this naturally, there are many exceptions, but large numbers have left India to make careers in the first world countries, or at least where they can be more successful and have better lives and lifestyles, away from the problems and politics of third world growing economy like India. Understandable, all of this. And again, I'm not trying to moralize here. I would have done that myself in my 20s and 30s. I'm just looking at how the trend of some of our best leaving in millions has affected our society and our politics in general, and with the problems at hand, what can we do? So first, to people who left, when we leave India, what we take with us is the pride we feel for our country, and we want our contemporaries in these new places to respect us for where we came from. We usually don't want to talk about why we left India in the first place. We want our passports to be powerful and respected. And that is quite understandable too. So any news that makes us feel odd about India, anything that can be asked of us as representatives of India, is seen as avoidable, or at least to be glossed over, because there is shame attached to it. And over time, this becomes our narrative. And anything and anyone that gives us a sense of pride is welcome. What that does over years is that whilst it gives us a warmer international perception, especially amongst our communities and peer groups abroad, it takes away our ability to look at our native place, i.e. India, with, I think, fairer eyes. I have many friends who've, have lived and have now settled outside of India, the brightest from our class. When they visit India, which is like at least once a year, what greets them is new airports and roads and better cars. They can afford our well-established luxury tourism sector now and stay in India and experience India almost like a Karan Johar movie. Shop, eat well, travel, meet relatives, have a good time, and then they go away having seen the new India with their own eyes. And what is true is that this is also India. We have made huge progress in the last 30 odd years, and we should be very proud of it. But just like any Karan Johar movie, it's just a small romanticized piece of an otherwise complex picture. This, by the way, also applies to many of us living in larger cities within India. Our homes and colonies, our cars, our offices, our commute, our meeting places and restaurants, our travel, our hotels, our children's schools, their meeting places. This is, it's like a clean bubble within our system, almost like a first world bubble floating above the rest of the country, right? And this bubble rarely gets to see the rest of the country or people. We can now afford to live within India, actually slightly above India, without having to deal with India's problems. That, I think, is really unfortunate, because when we do not see what is uncomfortable in our own country, over time we start to believe it does not exist, or at least doesn't exist for us. So, and I'm talking to the patriot in us. I think as true patriots, even if we do not want to get actively involved in day-to-day problems of India, it is incumbent on us to ask questions that give us a well-rounded understanding of our country. We must, by all means, keep the flag high and feel the pride in what we've been able to do. We have made significant progress in various fields over the last 3 decades. I'm not an expert, but I know that, there are key metrics that will, tell us what has happened. Substantial, economic growth. Our GDP growth rates have fluctuated over years, but have generally trended upwards. Our IT and software services, telecom, space exploration, and the shining star in the last 3 decades, infrastructure development, length of highway constructed, the expansion of airports, development of ports. We've seen substantial improvement contributing to, naturally economic growth and connectivity. However, and we are corporate trained, my request is, please don't stop asking questions about our national dashboard. Make one for yourself if we are not, one is readily available to you. How are we doing on education? Especially the quality of education, especially after COVID. On health, quality of our health services delivery system. We saw that, tested during COVID, and we lied about the number of deaths. On the jobs we have been able to provide our youth, security of women, on malnutrition, on the state of our democratic institutions, on poverty, on how do our minorities feel. All this is part of our national dashboard. What this overall dashboard would do is to give us a well-rounded understanding of what the conversations at our dinner tables should be. If we really love India and have the privilege of being educated, we must ask relevant questions, like we would in our corporate reviews. So today, especially if you're outside India, you might actually have a better chance as asking these tough questions. You don't even have to be brave to ask these tough questions. It just comes as a democratic right where you might be. So please help us strengthen democracy in India by raising these questions from wherever you are. Think about this. When we were fighting for our independence, the absolutely best of us from across the country, across classes, the bravest and the smartest of us stood up because it was time that required all of us to come together for a singular idea, the idea of a free and independent India. When we remove the Karan Johar film kind of narrative of India and ask difficult questions, we will start to realize why this may be another such time. We may not have a clearly identified tactical day-to-day goal for each of us that can be offered, or even consistent leadership. This is a confusing time. We don't know who to trust, who to follow. But we do have certain ideals that are so worth fighting for. And to a large extent, these are common sense. Any smart person knows that a peaceful, well-run, democratic, diverse, secure for women, and honest country will also be a better place to live and do business in. It's a no-brainer. That is why so many of us left India. Matt Langdon says the opposite of a hero is not a villain. It's a bystander. Hero ka ulta villain nahi hota. Hero ka ulta hota hai tamashbeen. India needs its heroes today. We don't need tamashbeens. And everyday heroism is not difficult. When we see something wrong, let's speak up and ask questions. Complain if you must. Usme kya problem hai? And consider taking a risk for other people also. Irrespective of who runs the next government, it is quite evident that we can't leave India to be run only by people who are in the game of unchecked power alone. We need to bring back a sense of seva bhav, using our participation of citizens, day-to-day participation, and interest in India. Elections are fine and we must choose well. However, we can't stay away from day-to-day democracy. And it starts with educating ourselves about what citizens can do. Tum Baat Toh Karte is our way of reminding ourselves that polite conversations, but focused, respectful conversations can go a long way. We don't need to shout. We don't need to belittle anyone. We don't need unnecessary drama and arguments. We need smart, decent, educated, and well-meaning people to participate in thinking about India, and not just in the economic sense. वो हम solve कर रहे हैं. More as we build Tum Baat Toh Karte over the next months, years. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Do please write to me. Leave your comments and share what we are doing. I really appreciate this. Much sunshine and laughter to you. Jai Hind.
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।